It's time for a new Axiom Verge game. Expectations have been high for this sequel given popularity of the first game. What has the game's creator Thomas Happ done this time? Has he managed to create a game that maintains the same high quality as its predecessor? Questions I answer in this video. In any case, let me say this: if you expect a similar copy of the first game, look elsewhere, because this game is completely different. This is Switchy speaking. Please subscribe to my channel for more game related content, reviews and so on. Now let's dive deep into Axiom Verge 2. The game takes place in Antarctica, where a science team led by Dr. Hammond has disappeared. The now missing Dr. Hammond owned a successful IT company that was now acquired by an Indra Chowdhury. Indra receives a message about a missing daughter. She needs to go down to Antarctica to investigate what happened. What will she find there? I immediately notice how different this game is compared to its predecessor. When the helicopter lands in Antarctica, it feels like you're sucked into the game. You must solve a mystery here. The first Axiom Verge game originated somewhere in New Mexico, but you played in a completely different and imaginative world. Now you're actually in a place that really exists, so the realistic factor makes the game feel different, but true to life. A new thing implemented in the game is that you run around in dark rooms. When you enter a building, you use a flashlight to light up rooms that have been abandoned for a long time. This contributes greatly to the game's atmosphere and creates an environment that makes you want to explore further. In addition, you run around in the Antarctic underground, where there is no light, so your flashlight becomes necessary to be able to see. This does not mean that the whole game is obscured, only certain parts. The map system has been renewed compared to the first game. In Axiom Verge, the maps consisted of the classic grid pattern. In this game, it is actually graphic maps. It looks very nice and makes it a little easier to orientate yourself in the game. Of course, you see where you have not been yet, but also where you can explore further. In addition, you get an idea of the places you have already visited and whether it is worth going back to investigate. Pretty quickly, one realizes that the combat system is significantly different compared to before. The first Axiom Verge game was more of a run and gun game, while this game is usually based on melee combat. At first you use your ice pick to damage enemies, and I think that makes the game much harder. Since you cannot keep your distance from all enemies, there is a great risk that you will take damage yourself. But soon enough you find a boomerang that makes it easier to eliminate enemies from a distance. The boomerang does not do as much damage as the ice pick, but is almost a necessary complement to be able to survive in the game. Unfortunately, the boomerang feels a bit clumsy to use and does not give a particularly nice feeling. It's like you do not want to use the boomerang but just stick to using the ice pick. A little further into the game you will find upgraded variants of the ice pick, such as the bronze axe, double axe and a sickle sword. These weapons do significantly more damage, but are otherwise very similar to the ice pick. It is important to learn to use the different weapons so that you get used to how you can most easily kill your opponents. At first it feels awkward, but it gets better afterwards. This time they have also created an upgrade system for weapons, health and other items. It is possible to make your melee and ranged weapons stronger and faster. You will need to find some items that can then be used to purchase upgrades. Sometimes it feels like the weapons you have access to are so boring to use that you just want to avoid getting close to your enemies. As if the game is a survival game rather than a 2D action game. And maybe that's the idea of the game. The risk of being injured is great, so you choose to stay away from the enemy instead of going into battle. The enemies consist mostly of fantasy characters and giant scorpions. Scorpions are one of the most common animals in Antarctica, right? Still waiting to see some penguins though. In fact, the game does not contain many different enemies, or many enemies at all. Sometimes you can run around for a long time before going to battle. Maybe it creates a certain excitement and changes the purpose of the game. The focus is on investigating and exploring rather than slaughtering large numbers of enemies. It's almost like a puzzle game where it's about finding the right path. And the right path can only be found by discovering certain objects that can open up new areas. A fun aspect of the game that is also typical of Metroidvania games is just finding different objects that give you new abilities. Quite early on, you break a yellow urn that allows you to cling to different walls. This means that you can now move on in the game and also find objects that were previously out of reach. After a while, you will find an object called Mushes. This object allows you to infect your surroundings and manipulate the properties of enemies and other objects, like this static object that turns into a lift, for example. Like the first game, you use a drone. Your drone has got some new things to play with. For example, a lasso that allows the drone to reach new heights. Playing as a drone usually takes you into a pixelated world and offers a certain variety to the game. It feels like the developer has put more focus on being able to play as a drone. It is relatively common to have to switch from human to drone in order to advance in the game. A large part of the game is about exploring different places. Just as in the first Axiom Verge game, secrets can be hidden in places where you least expect it. Therefore, it is important to be observant and try different solutions. Maybe it is possible to destroy different walls that open up new paths, or rediscover and get past obstacles that were previously closed. It's a really fun aspect of the game, to explore every single surface, find objects that strengthen you and feel that you're developing into a powerful character. In the first Axiom Verge game, you could clearly see that you would meet a boss. Often they were associated with some cutscene before going into battle. This time, the bosses are more a part of the world itself, like a 2D open world boss. All of a sudden, this huge monster appears, and you do not know if it's a boss or something else. They are not very difficult to eliminate, and usually the reward is not that great. But it is always fun to come across a super big and scary monster while running around and doing other things in the game. Thomas Happ has created a game that is clearly different from the first Axiom Verge game. All new objects contribute to the need to think of new ways to find solutions to various problems. It is quite fun to find things, test what they're for and be able to move on in the game. The ice pick and the boomerang in all its glory, but had wished me something better and different. Maybe the purpose of the game is not to go around and shoot to win, but rather to be able to survive and playing smart. And that is the big difference between the two Axiom games, for better or worse. This is not a bad sequel at all, but also not as entertaining as the first game. If you want to buy the game digitally, you can do so in the Nintendo eShop, costs less than $20. Thank you for listening, have a nice day.